Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's amazing to me that we still have a math problem between the two sides of the aisle here. But we do. And, I want to try to address this math problem. Last year when I asked Secretary of Energy, Ms. Granholm, how much energy does the United States consume, she couldn't answer the question. And when you go back a couple of years ago, you see that the consumption has actually risen by about 0.5% annually. But Department of Energy, the same one that Ms. Granholm ran, actually has predicted that it's going to be between 5 to 6% increase in consumption in the next 10 years. And yet, we're still talking about unreliable sources here, which is just unbelievable to me. And the billions of dollars that are being pushed out because of the IRA, we'll get to those questions, but the answer to that question was 4,292 terawatt hours in 2022 with a 0.5% increase annually. But that's changing. So, Mr. Brickhouse, what I want to talk to you about, first off, is in your testimony, you talk about tripling of increase for natural gas demand. And I want to hear what's holding us back from using that as a provider.
Well, from Basin Electric's perspective, nothing is preventing us from using it. Since 2010, again, we've grown 5% annually each year on average. Since then, we have added roughly 1,000 megawatts of natural gas generation to our portfolio. At the same time, thankfully for the wind resources in our service territory, we've added a similar amount of wind generation. As we look out through the balance of this year, we'll add 600 megawatts of dispatchable natural gas generation, and then we'll spend $4 billion between now and 2030 to add another 1,500 megawatts of natural gas generation.
What's the most important quality to you? Is it affordability? Is it reliability? Is it this notion that somehow one form or another is cleaner? I mean, what's the most important as a deliverer of electricity? What is the most important characteristic?
Well, I think anybody that joins the electric utility industry, we're a public service industry, which I think is a noble calling, and our objective is to produce safe and reliable and affordable power in an environmentally responsible manner. I think everyone at this table that's employed by a utility, that's our tagline.
And natural gas can do that and is that with
most definitely
40% of the production of Mr. Black, permitting reform.
Yes.
What I was trying to get at, what's holding us back from using that? Tell us about the detrimental effects of not having permitting reform to deliver affordable, reliable, clean energy.
Sure. Yeah, there are three fairly specific things that we could do to amend, this process: the Clean Water Act and NEPA and judicial reform to prevent litigation and uncertainty around infrastructure projects. And I think the important point of all this is, and you asked a great question of what's the constraint right now. And I checked gas prices this morning; they were a little less than $3 per MMBTU, and pipelines are the constraint, right? There's a finite amount of space in a pipe. And if we don't have enough pipes, you get to a point where you have things like basis blowout, which is the cost of transportation blows out, 10 times more than the cost of gas. So our need is to build the infrastructure so that we don't create our own constraint and we can get access to that today, sub $4 gas.
I was just trying to Google gas prices in Europe, and I'm sure we can do that relatively quick, but it's not $3 an MCF. It's much higher than that. Mr. Haque, in the last 45 seconds, any expanded thoughts on permitting and how we can deliver for the needs that we know? We're in an energy expansion. That's where we are.
We support permitting reform. Anything we can do to get energy infrastructure built more expeditiously, whether that's generation or transmission, will be extremely helpful. One additional factor that we didn't discuss with respect, I appreciated Mr. Brickhouse and Mr. Black's responses. I think policy also has, and specifically decarbonization policy, is specifically in the gas industry right now. It could be the cheapest resource possible to build out and will also, help with grid reliability in tandem with the renewable resources that we are going to naturally see find their way onto the system. But if sort of there's a policy overhang that creates a risk premium that is really too high for investors to invest in, that is sort of another factor on top of what has already been referenced that creates challenges for natural gas generation to get built out on the system.
Thank you very much. Time has expired. Yield back.